This meeting is now being recorded.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jeremy Malarski. I am Policy Director for the Missouri Coalition of Children's Agencies. Today is February 26, 2019, and we are doing a bit of a screencast for training in MECA's medication certification system. It's the first webinar I've done in a little while. We did about 2 or 3 last year, and it is our hope that we'll be able to do these fairly regularly. You are welcome to attend these live. We send the invitations out through our newsletter, and to subscribe to that newsletter and get the weekly tips or MedCert, what we call MedCert tips of the week, you want to go over here to our manuals and guides page. I am here on emeca.org. And this manuals and guides page has a lot of our resources, probably the most essential resources for our web system. And more to the point, if you are not already getting our weekly tips, this is where you want to go. You want to go to the manuals and guides page and just type in your email address here, and that's how you opt in to the weekly tips service. You should be getting those every week, just about, in your inbox. If for whatever reason you're subscribed and not getting them, then you can contact us. A lot of times it's something in your junk mail folder, and we might touch on junk mail folders a little bit later in the webinar, but every email account, most modern email accounts have some kind of system that flags spam. We all get spam and just kind of tucks it into a folder of junk mail. And sometimes that works the opposite way we want it if it's an email we really want to receive. So if you are expecting an email from us, maybe you haven't received a MedCert weekly tip for a while, you want to probably check that junk mail folder. And of course, you can always contact us and we'll try to solve the problem as best we can for you. Okay, so I wanted to go over double checking things, and this is a little bit of a longer dive into a MedCert tip we did several weeks ago about things that you can double check to minimize problems with the system. And I will go ahead and start. You will go to your LMS checkout site. Everyone has a different LMS checkout site for your organizations. If you do not know your organization's LMS checkout site, it is here in the general overview and class creation guide on the manuals and guides page. It's right around page 2 or so. We list all of them by your organization. You'll notice a bit of a pattern here, excuse me, where every site ends in .lmscheckout.com, all one word, lmscheckout.com. And then but there's a sort of an organizational code that goes before that, and it just kind of depends upon how we set your site up. But it's organization code .lmscheckout.com. We have a sort of sandbox site, which it doesn't matter. I'm not really working with real students or real classes on this one for MECA, and that's what I'm going to use for today's webinar. So you first step is to go to your LMS checkout site and log in. And every nurse instructor, when they log in, if they see this splash page, they'll want to go to the admin panel to start kind of diving in and managing your classes. Almost everyone starts in managed courses, live classes. And I want to just kind of bring your attention, this managed courses live classes page is where almost everything starts. And this link here, this view archive, it says view archive right now, is a bit of a toggle switch. It's like an on-off switch that if I click it, and multiple times they'll switch back and forth between what LMS calls archive classes versus active classes. What this really means to you is if you go to manage courses, live classes, and you don't see your class, you'll want to toggle that switch. You'll want to click to either archive or active classes, most likely archive classes. LMS tends to archive things after a fairly short period of time. And creating a new class is we go over that step by step in that this guide, but a couple things I want to kind of go over is the class roster, which is arguably one of the most important parts of your class. You can access your class roster here by expanding the class record. So I click this plus sign by the course name, and then in the bottom left corner there's the class roster. Let me go to one where I actually have students. None of the students are real, of course, but just for demonstration purposes, let me find a class roster with real students. And it looks something like this. Some of you have had trouble where there's an old class and students, for whatever reason, were not added to it. So the add users interface looks something like this. When I click add users, and you'll see this in class creation, it'll list every student on your site. And and to the left, on this box on the left, and to the right is where it's sort of like a little waiting room for me to potentially add students. So let me add just a few students here. Okay, and now they're here in kind of this waiting room, and if I'm sure I want to enroll these people, I click enroll. Now this action cannot be undone, I believe. When you enroll, I mean, we can cancel people for you, but you want to make sure that these are your students that you want to add. This is also a good opportunity to double check the spelling of email accounts, email addresses. That's hugely important. When you click enroll, it will tell you they've been added to the class. Here at the bottom, it shows you who has been added. And I can always return to that class roster. Now I say all this because, again, we've had trouble where people think they're adding students, or maybe the students are on their written class roster and they don't add them to the class roster here in the LMS Checkout Med Cert system. And we've had problems down the line because we have to verify that those students did indeed attend those classes. So this is a good time to just make sure that everybody's here that needs to be here. You'll notice, again, like most web browsers, you can kind of scroll around a bit, scroll left to right, or if there's a lot of students, you can scroll up and down. Definitely worth doing that to make sure all your students are there. Also want to call attention to the fact that you can zoom in and out if you need to see everything, or you see things more clearly. I'm just clicking this is my keyboard, and I'm clicking, I'm typing Control minus and Control plus, zoom in on my browser, and that works for most web browsers. But you definitely want to double check your students. Let's talk a little bit about individual students and creating accounts as well. MedCert pretty much runs on email addresses. So every student and every user, in fact, administrators, nurse instructors, the way the computer tells that you are a distinct and unique person, for lack of a better phrase, is through your email address. So I say that to point out that email addresses have to be spelled correctly. If there's even one character out of place, if like a dot in the wrong place, then your students will not get alerts from the system, and they may not be able to log in. Your username in LMS Checkout is your email address. So it's got to be spelled right, and it's got to be an email address that can receive emails. So the first thing I want to go over in terms of double checking is class rosters. Make sure all your students are there. And the second thing is email addresses. Make sure that when you are typing in email addresses for new students, or maybe even editing them, that the email address is spelled correctly. It's a good idea to verify that the student can receive emails. We have had instances in the past where someone is a brand new hire. They just walked in the door, it's their orientation day, and we want to set that person up to be a nurse instructor in MedCert. And you send MECA the form, and we create the account for them, but that person's email address has not actually physically been set up yet by your organization's IT department, and that can lead to delays. So you definitely it's a good idea to make sure that somebody can actually receive emails. And to edit someone's email address, you can click edit on their user account. This is, by the way, the way I got to where I am right now. I just went to users and groups and users. Note also that if you, for whatever reason, you need to do some troubleshooting and see what's going on for a student, you can log in as that student as well as edit their account. Okay. Now, by the way, on this user form, the name is somewhat important just so we can identify people. The email address is critically important, as I just kind of went over probably too much. And this drop down for what they are, this doesn't have anything to do with website functionality, but it does kind of help us keep the record straight. So if somebody is a new student, you want to label them as a new student. Okay. What's the last thing I wanted to go over? Yeah, logging in as a student, students won't be able to see the same kind of stuff that we do. It looks like this. Very often when you're logging in as a student, what you're looking for is kind of a launch button here. If they've been enrolled in a course, there should, and particularly if they're an initial student, you'll want to see a launch button when you log in as them. Students just log in, they click the launch button, and they take their tests. Research students don't have to touch this website at all. They can just take the course and demonstrate competencies to you, the nurse instructor, and they're done. But initial students do have to use the website. They really do have to have valid email addresses. And when they log in, you'll want to see a launch button here. 99% of the time when I get emails that say, "Oh, my student didn't receive the test link," they just need to log in, and you can verify that it's not some bigger problem by logging in as them. And if you log in as them and don't see a launch button, then that typically spells out some kind of other problem. That's more rare, but the most common one is I have a student that I've enrolled in a class, and they didn't get a link telling them to log in. Well, sometimes they won't, especially if they're a returning student. Like if you have an old student that's tested before and maybe they've lapsed and they're coming back, LMS checkout isn't going to know they're a new user, and so when you enroll them in your class, it might not necessarily send them an email address. The solution is to just have them log in. And I'll demonstrate this. Just go to the page for your site, go to whatever.lmscheckout.com and click this login button. And their username will always be their email address. If they don't have their password memorized, that's okay. Just click this forgot password thing and type in their email address and submit, and they should get an email. This solves it 99% of the time. Some of you have asked, can I reset someone's password? I mean, technically, yes, but everything I do when I'm resetting someone's password is exactly the same as this part of the interface. So they can reset. The nurse instructors and students themselves can have password reset emails sent to themselves just as easily as I can. I don't have any special power to do that. Everybody can do that. Okay. Those are the two main things I wanted to cover. It doesn't look like we have any live attendance for today's webinar, and that's fine. This recording will be available on emeca.org on the manuals and guides page. And that's, again, this page right here. We have several videos and walkthrough tutorials to get you through the process. This one is probably the most used one, the general overview and class creation guide, because it's the most complete one. It kind of goes through the process step by step and gives you a good introduction. One thing I also point out is when creating a class, and actually when working with this site, you'll notice a lot of features that we don't use. So the course settings, the featured courses, we don't typically use that. There's stuff on the class creation form that we don't use, SKU number, product code, we don't use any of those. That's why we have this guide, because the guide is there to kind of show you, okay, here's a screenshot of what the form is going to look like, more or less, and here are arrows that are point to everything you need to do. And kind of call attention to that. Let's see. When you have classes listed, note that you can sort them through these headers. Usually by date is what you want. Oh, and let's talk about certificates. So, very common question is, when does somebody have a valid certificate, and when does the next one expire? So that is mostly determined. You can determine that through our reports interface. So you click reports and certifications, and this list can also be sorted. So I can sort by expiration date and see who's the most current, and if I scroll down, who's about to expire or has expired. Okay. One thing to note on this is, just like the class listing, you'll want to probably expand these records to make sure there's not one that's more current than the one being displayed. By default, it will display the one that is about to come up the soonest. So if I expire, so today is, I've gone over this before. So today is February 26, 2019. Let's suppose I have a certificate that's going to expire tomorrow, but I also renewed last month. So technically I have two expiration dates. I have the one that's going to expire tomorrow, and then I have the one that's going to expire 14 months from last month, or whenever it was I took my test, or whenever it was I recerted. The tomorrow expiration date is going to be the one that appears on this list by default. If I want to see the one that actually expires a little less than 14 months by now, I have to expand the record. So bottom line is, if that didn't make any sense, if you look up a student on report certifications and it looks like they have, and you know they've recently recertified, but the date showing up wrong, before you panic, click this plus sign and look at all the dates. Okay. To actually generate a printer-friendly certificate, you have to find the course where the student was last certified. One way to do that is, all of our certifications work on a 14-month cycle. So this student says they expire February 23rd, 2020. That means that I'm roughly looking for a class from probably early this year or late last year, because that would be 14 months before February 23rd, 2020. And I can go to Manage Courses, Live Classes, and sort my classes and look for that one. Why is this important? Because if I want to generate a certificate for that student, let's say I want to generate a certificate for Ted Danson from his completion of this class on in July 2018. One of the drop downs here you'll notice is assign certificate. This is we implemented this mid last year. You always want this set to MECA certificate final, and save. If you haven't saved it, save it, and then look at view issued certificates, and you will see a list of every student that you certified in that class, and two buttons. One displays a printer-friendly version of the certificate with the expiration date, and the other one will email it to that student using the email address associated with that student's account. Okay. I believe that is most of what I was going to cover today. We will have, we're going to try and increase the frequency of these. So we are going to have one in 2 days from now on February 28th at 10 a.m. So the same time. I hope some of you are able to attend. And even if not, again, we have these recordings. Thank you for using our system, and please send any questions our way and any feedback on these webinars, videos, tutorials, and walkthroughs.